The most dangerous chess piece is most of the time not the piece that move, but the piece that is hiding behind it. Today, we learn the discovered attack, the move your opponent never sees coming. A discovered attack happens when you move one piece, and by moving it, you reveal an attack by a different piece that was hidden behind the piece that was moved. In this case, your knight move attacking the king reveals another move attacking a different piece entirely. In this case, a queen. The rook in this situation, the rook on f1 is pointing directly to the queen, but there is a knight on f3 in between these two pieces, the black queen and the f1 rook. Now, how do you reveal the attack? It is by playing what we call the discovered attack. By playing the move knight to e5, you not only attack the king, which is the obvious move, playing your knight, you not only attack the king, but you now reveal the attack on the black queen. So what a black needs to address is the attack on the king, which then makes you available to capture the queen on f8. Indirectly, black is attacking two pieces at once, and one of those attacks was completely invisible until the movement of your knight. So it is until you moved your knight to e5 that you reveal the attack of the rook, right? So that is why we call it a discovered attack. You won't have discovered the attack unless you moved your knight away. A discovered attack becomes even more powerful when it involves a check, just like I've shown you. We call it a discovered check. A discovered check is when you move a piece and reveal a check from the piece behind it. Your opponent must deal with this check immediately, which gives you a free move with the piece that was just, moved. This is a quick example of a discover check, which I'm going to show us now. So in this situation, we just swapped the position of the king and the queen, right? We just swapped the position. So by playing your knight to e5 in this situation, you have a discovered check. Your knight revealed an attack from your rook, which was not open before the knight move on f3 to e5. But immediately you move your knight, your f1 rook directly attacks the king on f8, which made the king move. Now, by moving the king, the queen becomes available for the knight to capture on d7. So this is an example of a discovered check. The most devastating version of all of these discovered attacks is the double check. For a double check, when it happens, for it to happen, two pieces or both the piece that was moved and the piece that is uncovered, right? And the piece that moved that was shown after the piece that was moved, they both give a check at the same time, right? They both give a check to the king at the same time. That is what we call the double check. So the rook in the situation that I showed us that was shown here, that the one on f1, and this knight, in this case, this is not a double check, but I'm going to show us a double check soon. And this knight that moved, both of them will be giving a check to the king on f8. So that is what we call the discovered that's what we call the discovered check. So the only way that the king can escape this double check is to move the king away. There's nothing else that can be done, right? So you cannot capture, you cannot there's no way to capture both of the checking pieces, and then there's no way to block the checking pieces, right? So if it is just a single piece that is attacking the king, you can find a way to capture it or block it with another piece, and then but you cannot do that, right, in the situation where you have a double check, and then and you just have to move your king, right? So let's look at this particular position where we have a double check situation. So let's take a look at this position here. So there are two instances that some players can consider. When you play your knight here to, let's say you play it to c6, you have what we call a discovered check, discovered double checks, right? So you have the check from e1 attacking the king on e7, and then you have the knight on c6 attacking that same king on e7, right? So moving your knight revealed this discovered attack from the rook, and at the same time, the knight that was moved to c6 is also attacking the e7 king. So that is a discovered check. And at the same time, you have what we call a fork, a fork of the king and the queen. So you have to, you can also capture any of these two pieces. That is if you are playing in order for you to like to capture the most powerful piece on the board. But there is a better move here that makes you checkmate your opponent in two moves, right? So that is when you play your knight to G G6, right? Check, which is also what we call the discovered double check, because now you have your rook attacking the king and also your knight attacking the king. But in this situation, your the king has limited square to go, right? The king has very limited squares to go, and then because you've almost blocked everything with your pieces, so the only square left is this. So let me just show us. So when you play your knight to g6 double check, attacking the king and then attacking the king also with the rook, right? So you have what we call the discovered double checks. Now the king has just limited square to go, which is f7, and finally you give a very powerful checkmate by playing the king to h8, right, which is attacking the king, and then the king has nowhere to go because you are now occupying all of the squares that it can go. So this is a typical example of a discovered double checks, right? By moving your knight, you discover the rook attack on the king, and at the same time, the knight that was moved is also attacking the king on e7. Double check is the most violent forcing move in chess. It's very, very violent, and your opponent is forced and is paralyzed. It paralyzes the opponent, completely, especially if it is a double discovered, if it is discovered double check, right? So it paralyzes the opponent and makes them ask to like they have to like respond by moving the king away, and maybe lose when the most valuable piece or the most powerful piece on the board, or even end in a complete checkmate, which is the situation that we saw just now. Let me show you a famous discovered attack from one of the greatest games ever played in history. Bobby Fischer versus Donald Bryan in 1956. Bobby Fischer was just 13 years old as at this particular game. In this game, Fischer spotted a discovered attack involving a piece, like sacrificing a piece that nobody else would have seen. He moved a piece, and the discovered attack that followed eventually won him the game against one of the greatest and strongest adult players in the US as at the time. So let me show you quickly how the game went. So in this particular position, this is the move 15 of that particular game between Bobby Fischer and Brian. But I'm just going to start from move 15 just to show us about the discovered attack. If you want to, know about this particular game, you can just search online the greatest game of the century between Bobby Fischer and Brian, and then you get to see the whole complete game and analysis as well. So in this situation, Bobby Fischer is black, and mere looking at it, you see some attacks on black, right, where the bishop is ready to capture. Then from this move, the bishop, retreated back to c5, attacking Bobby Fischer's b6 queen, ready to capture it. Let's wait. Normally, a quick response is you trying to save your queen and maybe position it to a better square, and just something intuitive, something logical, right? But a 13-year-old Fischer said, "No, I'm not going to do that." So he played rook e8 check. Rook e8 checking the white king, and then white king needs to move, and then the king responded by moving to f1, right? And then Bobby Fischer, ignoring this particular queen attack on b6 by the bishop, played his bishop to e6. Bishop to e6, attacking the bishop, the unprotected bishop on c4. And what did Brian respond with? He captured the queen, right? This probably would be the greatest mistake Brian made in this particular game, capturing the queen. But then again, Bobby Fischer, a 13-year-old, you just is seeing something different, completely different from everyone else. Played bishop captured c4, capturing the bishop on c4, following what? An attack on the king, a check on white king. Oh, so this forces black and white rather to move. And if you look at it, there is an open file for the rook on e8, controlling the whole file, preventing the king from even coming out in this situation, right? So the king only has two moves, g1 and that particular f1 check. So this is where the old discovered attacks start, right? So in the next move, king g1, you can see that black has also strategically placed their knight on c3, allowing them to play it to maybe e2 check, and then bringing back the king back and forth to g1 and f1. So after king knight e2 check, king move back to f1, and then the knight move away, we have what we call the discovered attack. So this is the discovered check that I talked about. Moving your knight away, there is a discovered check on this king, but just because the king is not able to capture this bishop on c4, and there is no other piece to capture it or defend this attack without losing a bigger piece, right? So and then we have this knight takes pawn and then move back to g1, and then the same attack again, and then move back to f1 again, and then the knight to c2. So if you see what Bobby Fischer did in this situation here, is to the first knight capture in the discovered attack is to create a direct path for this g7 bishop, right? So because this pawn is blocking that path, so and then creates a direct path for the bishop, and eventually after capturing it went back to c3. Now you can see now that the pawn is no more there, and then the bishop is directly protecting the knight on c3, right? And don't forget this same discovered attack that is still there, that prevents black from playing, or white rather, from playing any other thing other than the king. So after g1 again, then Bobby Fischer played another discovered attack, pawn takes b6. Pawn takes b6, exposing the rook to the attack of the queen, of the white queen. So it wasn't this a7 capture b6 pawn bishop that was important, but the rook on a8 that is attacking the queen on um on a3, that is very fascinating. And then the game goes on to be won by a different sequence, like some that are very amazing by Bobby Fischer that is played. So the game goes on to be won by Bobby Fischer, a 13-year-old as at that time. So this is the game that introduced Bobby Fischer to the chess world. He was a 13-year-old. He was a 13-year-old boy using a discovered attack to defeat, a grandmaster level player as at that time. So this is what understanding tactics, can do for you. So I'm going to give us a very practical guide for finding discovered attacks in your own game. So let's say you are playing a game. How do you find discovered attacks? How do you know when you have the opportunity and when to even play a discovered attack? The first thing you need to do is you look at every piece you have. You understand? You must look at every single piece you have on your board, from your pawn down to your king, every single piece of the board. And then you now draw an imaginary line from each of your piece in every direction it can move. Right? So this is why whenever you see a player taking 30 minutes, 1 hour to make just a single move, especially Grandmaster, just know that it is all of these different tactics that is playing in their mind. The pin, the discovered attack, the double attack, the fork, all of these different tactics are playing in their mind. So if you have not checked out some of our other tactics, you can look at our playlist, and then you see we've talked about so many other tactics you can learn from. So all of this is playing in their mind. So you want to look at every single piece on your board, and then draw an imaginary line in the direction they can go, and see if you can find any discovered attack. And then the step two, you now ask yourself, is there a friendly piece blocking any of those lines? Imagine you have like your rook and a knight at the top, and then you've asked yourself that, can I move any of these pieces? Is there a friendly one? Like when it is friendly, it means it belongs to you. Like that is blocking any of those pieces. If yes, that blocking piece might be able to, move to create a discovered attack. You understand? After you ask the question, it is possible that that blocking piece might be able to move to create that discovered attack for you. And then step three is then you now ask the question: if that blocking piece should move, what does the line behind it, right? So what does the other piece, what is it attacking, right? If you move the piece that is in front, that is blocking your other piece, if you move it away, what is the piece behind, what is it exposed to, right? Is it an enemy's piece? Is it an enemy's king? If it is any of these, then it is the landing square of the moving piece safe? You understand? So that is another question you need to ask. You are moving a piece away to expose or reveal another piece. The piece you are moving away, it has to be in a position where it is safe. It has to be holding a position where it is safe, right? So when you move it to a place where it is safe, and then the other discovered is the discovered piece is now exposed to maybe the king or the queen, then you have what we call a discovered attack. And then you also ask, can it deliver its own attack from there, right? So is it possible that it is the piece that you are moving that is attacking the king or any of your opponent's piece, while the revealed piece is attacking the king, or it is other way around? In any of this situation, just make sure that either the piece you are moving or the one that is attacking, that is revealed, they are both safe, they are both protected. And then the last step, the step four, if both attacks are real, then you are ready to play your discovered attack. Then you are ready to play. You need to recognize this pattern, and then you need to remember the pattern, right? The pattern is the moving piece creates a distraction, something like that, create a distraction, which then revealed, you know, a piece behind it. The revealed piece does the real damage. So the moved piece is just a distraction, while the revealed piece does the real damage. The opponent cannot respond to both at once. They have to do one, and then you get to do a very damaging attack with the second one. So let me quickly give us a puzzle, right? And then you try to find the discovered attack that is going to win a material. I'm going to give us 15 seconds to do this. So let's see if we can find this discovered attack in this position. So let's take a look at this particular position here, and then we try to find the discovered attack, right? So all right, so let's look at this position again and try to find the discovered attack. 15 seconds. All right, I think it's over 15 seconds. So looking at this position, again, the question you ask yourself based on the steps, the guidelines on how to find the discovered attack is you have to look at every of your piece, right? And then after you look at a piece, you look at two pieces that are maybe behind each other, and then you moving one is going to expose the other, right? You moving your queen in this situation is most likely not going to expose your bishop. You moving your knight is going to expose your bishop, but is your bishop attacking any of your opponent's pieces? But you moving your knight in this situation is going to expose your bishop, right? In this case, the knight on f6 and expose the bishop on d7, and it's going to directly attack this bishop on d4, right? So Now this is the time this is where you know the knight to move, and then you ask yourself that am I going to position my knight in a very safe square? When you play your knight to e4, for example, this is not very safe, right? Because there's a pawn on f3 attacking the e4 square, right? Or protecting the pawn on e4. But anyways, when you play this move like this, you are trying to capture the knight and eventually maybe capture this rook on f1 here. So that is where you distract. This is the distraction we are talking about. Capturing the pawn with your knight, even though you know that the pawn is protected by another pawn, right? But that creates what we call this discover. It reveals that discovered attack, and then you are ready to capture the bishop on d4. The bishop on d4 comes with what? A check, and then you have what we call a fork as well, because now you are now attacking the king and then the rook on a1, and you are now ready to capture the rook on a1 with your bishop. So this is the typical example of a discovered attack, right? You uncovered your bishop by moving your knight, and then white does not have any escape for the check on their king. So tomorrow we are going to learn how pawns work, right? The structure of pawns, everything about pawn structure, pawn breaks, fast pawns, and why pawns decide more games than any other piece. See you next time.